The day Sylvia Adams rode into Winnemucca, Nevada, in the scorching summer of 1876, she nearly trampled the sheriff's deputy, and when he hollered at her to watch where she was going, she told him to watch where he was standing. The deputy sputtered and turned red, but Sylvia had already moved on, guiding her dusty mare toward the general store without a backward glance. She had traveled 300 miles from Sacramento, and she was not about to let some fool man slow her down now. The whispers started before she even dismounted. Women in their bonnets clutched their shopping baskets tighter and exchanged meaningful looks. Men loitering outside the saloon stopped their conversation mid-sentence to stare. Sylvia ignored them all. She had been 22 years old for exactly 3 weeks now, and in those 3 weeks she had buried her father, sold his failing mercantile business, packed everything she owned into 2 leather saddlebags, and decided to start fresh in Nevada, where her late mother's sister owned a cattle ranch. The general store smelled of tobacco, leather, and coffee beans. Behind the counter stood a portly man with spectacular mutton chops who introduced himself as Herbert Mills. When Sylvia asked for directions to the Adams ranch, his expression shifted from welcoming to something resembling pity. "That would be Margaret Adams' place," he said slowly. "Your kin, my aunt, my mother's sister." Herbert scratched his chin. "Nobody told you then." Sylvia felt her stomach drop. "Told me what?" "Margaret passed on about 2 months back. Fever took her quick. The ranch has been sitting empty since." "Well, not empty exactly. She had a foreman, but he left soon as the funeral was done. Place has probably been picked over by now, I am sad to say." The news hit Sylvia like a physical blow, but she refused to let it show. She had learned early that showing weakness invited trouble. "Who owns the property now?" "I suppose you might, if you are her only living relative. You had best talk to the lawyer, Edward Finch. His office is above the barber shop." Herbert leaned forward conspiratorially. "But miss, if you do not mind my saying, that ranch is no place for a woman alone. It is a full day's ride from town, and the property has been having trouble with rustlers and claim jumpers. You might be better off selling it and finding somewhere safer to settle." Sylvia's jaw tightened. "I did not ride 300 miles to turn around and run. Where is this lawyer?" As she left the store, she heard Herbert mutter to another customer, "Stubborn as a Missouri mule, that one. Won't listen to good sense." The lawyer confirmed what Herbert had said. Margaret Adams had left everything to her niece, Sylvia, in her will. The ranch comprised 2,000 acres of high desert grazing land, a ranch house, a barn, and about 200 head of cattle, though Finch admitted the count was probably lower now. "Your aunt was a formidable woman," Finch said, adjusting his spectacles. "Ran that ranch by herself for 15 years after her husband died, but she was getting on in years and the operation had been struggling. She could not keep reliable help. The last 3 foremen quit within a year. Said she was impossible to work for, too demanding, would not listen to advice." "Sounds like we would have gotten along," Sylvia said dryly. Finch did not smile. "Miss Adams, I must be frank with you. Several men in town have expressed interest in purchasing the property. I could arrange a very fair price. You could take the money, buy a nice house in town, live comfortably. A woman alone on a ranch that size is asking for trouble." "Then I suppose I will be trouble," Sylvia replied. "I want to see the property, today. It is a full day's ride." "You would need to camp overnight or wait until morning." "I have camped before, Mr. Finch. I will manage." As Sylvia walked back into the afternoon sun, she nearly collided with a man leading a horse to the water trough. He caught her elbow to steady her, and she looked up into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. He was tall, lean but muscular, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He wore dusty riding clothes and a black hat that had seen better days. "Steady there," he said, releasing her arm immediately. "You all right?" "Fine," Sylvia said curtly, stepping back. She was in no mood for small talk, especially not with strange men, no matter how blue their eyes were. But he was looking at her with open curiosity rather than the judgment she had gotten from everyone else. "You are new in town." "Passing through," she lied. "Shame," he said, and there was something warm in his voice that made her pulse quicken despite herself. "Always nice to see a new face." "I am Ryder Sullivan." "Sylvia," she said before she could stop herself, then added nothing more, just Sylvia, like a queen or something. Despite everything, she almost smiled. "Adams, Sylvia Adams." His expression changed instantly. "Margaret's niece. You knew my aunt." Everyone knew Margaret. She was tougher than most of the men in this county. He studied her face. "I can see the resemblance. You have her eyes, green as summer grass." Sylvia was not sure how to respond to that, so she said nothing. "I heard you talking to Finch through the window," Ryder continued, which should have annoyed her but somehow did not. "You are really planning to work that ranch yourself?" "That is my business, Mr. Sullivan." "Ryder, please. And you are right, it is your business. But if you are looking for help, I am a fair hand with cattle and horses. I have been working the Rogers place for the past year, but the old man sold out to his son, and the son brought his own crew. I am looking for new work." "I cannot afford to hire anyone right now," Sylvia said honestly. "Fair enough, but if you change your mind, I will be around. At least let me ride out with you today. Like everyone keeps saying, it is not safe for a woman alone." Sylvia's temper flared. "I do not need a man to protect me." "Did not say you did," Ryder replied calmly. "But you do not know the country, and I do. If you get lost or your horse throws a shoe, you will be in a bad spot. I am offering to be neighborly, nothing more." She wanted to refuse on principle, but he was right about not knowing the country. And there was something in his manner that was different from the other men she had encountered today. He was not lecturing her or telling her what she should do. He was offering help, not demanding she accept it. "Fine," she said at last, "but we leave now. I am not waiting around." Ryder's face broke into a grin that transformed his entire appearance. "Would not dream of asking you to. Let me grab my gear and we can head out." True to his word, he was ready in less than 10 minutes. They rode out of Winnemucca, heading northeast into country that grew more rugged and beautiful with every mile. The high desert stretched out in shades of gold and rust, punctuated by sage brush and the occasional juniper tree. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and blue against the endless sky. They rode in silence for the first hour. Sylvia was acutely aware of Ryder beside her, the easy way he sat his horse, the competent manner in which he scanned their surroundings. Finally, she could not stand the quiet any longer. "Why did you really offer to come with me?" she asked. He glanced at her, surprised. "I told you, being neighborly. Nobody else in town has been particularly neighborly." "That is because they are fools," Ryder said bluntly. "They think women should stay in parlors doing needlework. I grew up with 4 sisters who could outride, outshoot, and outstubborn any man I have ever met. I learned early that underestimating women is a good way to look like an idiot." Despite herself, Sylvia laughed. "Where are your sisters now?" "Scattered. 2 married and moved to California. One is teaching school in Salt Lake City. The youngest is still on the family ranch in Colorado with my parents." There was affection in his voice. "What about you? Any siblings?" "No, it was just me and my father after my mother died. I was 8. I am sorry. It was a long time ago." Sylvia paused, then found herself continuing. "My father never got over it. He loved her so much that when she was gone, it was like part of him died too. He tried his best with me, but I think I reminded him too much of what he had lost. That must have been lonely." It was such a simple observation, but it hit something deep in Sylvia's chest. "Yes," she said quietly. "It was." They rode in companionable silence after that, and Sylvia found it was not uncomfortable. Ryder pointed out landmarks, told her which water sources were reliable, warned her about a particular canyon where flash floods were common in the late summer. He talked about cattle, about the challenges of ranching in Nevada, about the best times to move herds to higher pastures. Sylvia absorbed every word, asking sharp questions that seemed to please him. "You have been reading up on ranching," he observed. "My father had books. I read everything I could find. Books are good, but this country does not always follow the rules. You have to learn to read the land itself, the weather, the animals. Your aunt understood that. She had a sense for the cattle, knew when they were getting restless before a storm, could spot a sick calf from 100 yards away. You admired her." "I did. Most people thought she was just difficult, but I thought she was principled. She would not compromise on things that mattered to her. That is not stubbornness, that is integrity." Sylvia glanced at him sharply. "That is a generous way to look at it. It is the truth." People called her too stubborn for any man, said that is why she never remarried after her husband died. But I think she just knew her worth and would not settle for less than she deserved. "Did you know her well?" "Well enough. I helped her out a few times when she was short-handed. We got along." He smiled slightly. "Maybe because I did not try to tell her how to run her ranch." As the sun began to sink toward the western mountains, they stopped to rest the horses near a small spring. Sylvia dismounted, stretching muscles that ached from the long ride. She was in good shape, but 300 miles in a week had taken its toll. Ryder unpacked some jerky and hardtack from his saddlebag and offered her half. They sat on rocks near the spring, eating in silence. The desert was coming alive with the sounds of evening, birds calling, insects chirping, the whisper of wind through sage. "Can I ask you something?" Ryder said after a while. "You can ask." "Why did you really come here? I mean, you could have stayed in Sacramento, started fresh there. Why travel all this way to a place you have never been?" Sylvia was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer. "After my father died, I realized I had been living his life, not mine. Working in his store, taking care of his house, listening to his friends tell me what a good daughter I was. But I was not happy. I did not even know what I wanted until I got the letter from my aunt's lawyer saying she had left me the ranch." "And what do you want?" "Something of my own," Sylvia said fiercely. "Something I built with my own hands, my own decisions. I am tired of being told what I should do, where I should go, who I should be. I want to live on my terms." Ryder nodded slowly. "That is worth fighting for. You do not think I am being foolish. Everyone else does. I think you have courage. There is a difference between brave and foolish, and I have known enough of both to tell them apart." He stood, dusting off his pants. "We should get moving. We have got another few hours before we reach the ranch." They arrived just as the last light was fading from the sky. The ranch house materialized out of the shadows, a low adobe structure with a covered porch and shuttered windows. Even in the dim light, Sylvia could see it needed work. One of the porch posts was leaning, several shutters hung crooked, and the whole place had an air of neglect. The barn was in better shape, a solid wooden structure with a good roof. Ryder helped her unsaddle the horses and settle them for the night with feed and water from the well. The well, at least, was in good working order. Inside, the ranch house smelled of dust and stale air. Ryder got a lamp lit while Sylvia threw open windows to let in the night breeze. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything was surprisingly clean under the dust. Margaret must have had someone looking after the place until the end, Ryder observed. "This is too tidy for a sick woman living alone." The lawyer said the foreman left right after the funeral. Thomas Brady. He was an all-right fellow, but not cut out for this kind of work. Liked his whiskey too much. They found bedding in a cedar chest, and Ryder insisted on sleeping in the barn while Sylvia took the main bedroom. She was too tired to argue. After he left, she stood in the doorway of what had been her aunt's room, looking at the simple bed, the washstand, the trunk at the foot of the bed. On the wall hung a faded photograph of a stern-looking woman with Sylvia's eyes and a tall man with a gentle face. Sylvia touched the photograph gently. "I am here, Aunt Margaret. I am going to make you proud." She slept poorly, plagued by dreams and the unfamiliar sounds of the desert night. When she finally gave up and walked outside into the pre-dawn darkness, she found Ryder already up, standing by the corral watching the eastern sky lighten. "Could not sleep either," he asked as she approached. "Too much on my mind. Want to see the property in daylight." They spent the morning riding the boundaries of the ranch. Ryder showed her the fence lines, many of which needed repair, the water sources, the areas where the cattle tended to gather. They found about 150 head scattered across the rangeland, fewer than there should have been. "Rustlers," Ryder said grimly, examining tracks near the western boundary. "They have been helping themselves, knowing the place was empty. Can we prove it? Probably not, and even if we could, the sheriff is not going to ride all the way out here for a few missing cows. You will have to protect your stock yourself." By midday, Sylvia had a long mental list of everything that needed doing. Fences to repair, cattle to round up and brand, the house and barn to maintain, water sources to check regularly. It was overwhelming, but instead of feeling discouraged, she felt energized. This was hers, all of it. Every problem, every challenge, every solution. They were heading back to the ranch house when they spotted a group of riders approaching from the south. 5 men, moving with purpose. "You know them?" Sylvia asked. Ryder's expression had gone hard. "The one in front is Clayton Morris. He owns the spread west of here. Not a good man." Clayton Morris was in his late 40s, thick around the middle with a florid face and cold eyes. He reined up a few yards away, his men spreading out behind him. "Well now," Morris said, ignoring Sylvia entirely and addressing Ryder. "Heard Margaret Adams finally kicked off. You working here now, Sullivan?" "I am a friend helping out," Ryder said evenly. "Waste of your time. This place is done for." Morris finally looked at Sylvia, his gaze dismissive. "You must be the niece from California. I knew Margaret, and I am here to do you a kindness. I will buy this property from you, give you a fair price. You can go back to civilization where you belong." Sylvia felt her temper rising but kept her voice steady. "The ranch is not for sale, Mr. Morris." His expression darkened. "Now do not be stupid, girl. You cannot run this place alone. You will be broke and begging within 6 months. I am offering you a way out." I said no. "You do not understand how things work out here. A woman alone is going to run into all sorts of problems. Accidents happen. Cattle wander off. Buildings catch fire. You need a man's protection." Ryder moved his horse slightly, positioning himself between Sylvia and Morris. "That sounded an awful lot like a threat, Clayton." "Just stating facts, Sullivan. This is rough country. The little lady should think carefully about her situation." "The little lady is right here and can speak for herself," Sylvia said coldly, "and she is telling you to get off her property. Now." Morris's face went red. "You are making a big mistake." "That is my choice to make. Leave." For a moment Sylvia thought Morris might refuse, but Ryder's hand had moved to rest casually on his hip near his gun. The gesture was not overtly threatening, but the message was clear. After a tense pause, Morris yanked his horse around. "You will regret this," he called back as he rode away. "Both of you." When the riders had disappeared over the ridge, Sylvia let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Her hands were shaking and she gripped the reins tighter to hide it. "That man is trouble," Ryder said quietly. "He has been trying to buy this land for years. Margaret would not sell and it ate at him. Do you think he was behind the rustling?" "I would bet money on it, but like I said, proving it is another matter." They rode back to the ranch in silence. When they reached the barn, Sylvia dismounted and turned to Ryder. "Thank you for coming with me yesterday and for this morning, but I can manage from here. Sylvia, I mean it. I appreciate your help, but I cannot afford to hire you and I will not accept charity." "What if I made you a different proposition?" Ryder said. "I work for room and board and a share of the profits when you sell cattle. No wages until the ranch is back on its feet." "That could be months, maybe a year. You would be working for nothing." "I would be working for a stake in something worth building. And besides," his mouth quirked in a half-smile, "I like a challenge." Sylvia studied him, trying to understand his angle. Men did not do things out of kindness. Her experience had taught her that. There was always something they wanted. As if reading her mind, Ryder said, "I know what you are thinking. What does he really want?" "The truth is, I am tired of working other people's ranches, following other people's orders. I want to be part of building something. Your aunt and I talked about me coming on as a partner before she got sick, but she died before we could formalize anything. I am not asking for that now. You do not know me well enough to trust me that far, but I am asking for a chance to prove myself." "Why should I trust you at all?" "You should not yet. But I am asking you to give me the opportunity to earn that trust. Let me stay on for a month. If you do not think I am pulling my weight or if you do not like working with me, I will leave, no hard feelings. But I think we could do something good here, Sylvia. I really do." She wanted to say no. Every instinct told her to protect herself, to not let anyone get close enough to hurt her or control her. But she also was not stupid enough to think she could run a 2,000-acre ranch entirely alone, especially not with someone like Clayton Morris actively working against her. "1 month," she said finally. "You sleep in the barn, you do your share of the work, and if I tell you to leave, you leave. Understood?" "Understood." Ryder extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Sylvia shook it. His grip was firm and calloused, the hand of someone who knew hard work. "We start tomorrow at dawn," Sylvia said. "Yes, madam." The next month passed in a blur of backbreaking work. They rose before dawn and worked until after dark, repairing fences, rounding up scattered cattle, fixing the leaning porch post, replacing broken shingles on the barn roof. Ryder proved to be everything he had promised, a tireless worker who knew ranching inside and out. More than that, he treated Sylvia as an equal partner, explaining things when she asked but never talking down to her, listening to her ideas even when they differed from his own. They fell into an easy rhythm. Sylvia would make breakfast while Ryder tended the horses. They would work together through the morning, break for a simple lunch, then continue until evening when Sylvia cooked dinner and Ryder did the cleanup. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, too tired to do anything but watch the stars come out and talk. It was during these conversations that Sylvia began to see Ryder as more than just a hired hand. He was intelligent and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh in spite of herself. He told her about growing up in Colorado, about his father teaching him to read the weather and his mother teaching him to see the worth in people regardless of their station. He had worked ranches since he was 14, saved every penny he could, dreaming of one day having land of his own. "Why did not you homestead your own place?" Sylvia asked one evening, thought about it. "But homesteading is brutal, especially out here. You are starting with nothing, breaking land that has never been worked, praying for rain that might not come. This way, working established ranches, I have learned what works and what does not without risking everything on my own inexperience. So you have just been waiting for the right opportunity. Something like that. He glanced at her, his face shadowed in the lamplight from the window. What about you? You ever think about getting married, having a family? Not really. Most men I have met wanted a housekeeper and a brood mare, not a partner. They would smile and nod when I talked, but they were not really listening. They were just waiting for me to stop so they could tell me how things really were. That sounds lonely. It was, is. Sylvia pulled her shawl tighter against the cooling night air. My father tried to arrange a marriage for me a few years ago. A business associate of his, a widower with 3 children. My father thought it was a perfect solution, someone to take care of me after he was gone. You said no. I met the man exactly once. He spent the entire dinner talking about his dear departed wife and how he needed someone to manage his household and raise his children properly. He asked me if I could sew and cook and keep accounts. He never asked me anything about myself, what I liked, what I wanted. I was just a position he needed to fill. And your father, he was disappointed, said I was too picky, too stubborn, that I would end up alone. The words still stung. Even now, Ryder was quiet for a moment. I do not think knowing your worth is the same as being stubborn. And I do not think wanting a partner who sees you as a person is being too picky. Sylvia felt something warm unfold in her chest. That is a kind thing to say. It is a true thing. He stood, stretching. I should let you get some rest. Early morning tomorrow. As he walked toward the barn, Sylvia sat alone on the porch, watching the stars and trying to understand the strange fluttering in her stomach whenever Ryder smiled at her. The 1-month mark came and went without either of them mentioning it. They had moved nearly all the cattle to better pasture, repaired most of the critical fence lines, and gotten the ranch functioning smoothly. More importantly, they had found their rhythm as partners. Ryder would spot a problem, Sylvia would suggest a solution. They would refine it together and get it done. It was not until a supply run into Winnemucca that Sylvia realized how much the town's perception of her had changed. Herbert at the general store greeted her warmly, asking after the ranch and praising the work she and Ryder had been doing. Other merchants who had been coolly dismissive on her first visit now stopped to chat, to ask her advice about livestock or offer tips about upcoming auctions. The lawyer Finch saw her coming out of the feed store and actually smiled. Miss Adams, you are looking well. I must admit, I did not think you would last a month out there. I am full of surprises, Mr. Finch, so I see, and I hear you are doing good work. The ranch is back in operation, the cattle are thriving. Your aunt would be proud. After he walked away, Ryder, who had been loading supplies into the wagon, said quietly, "He is right, you know. Margaret would be proud. We did it together. You hired me. That took trust and guts." A lot of women would have sold to Morris and taken the easy way. The easy way is not always the right way. Sylvia climbed into the wagon seat. Besides, you said you liked a challenge. Ryder laughed, swinging up beside her. That I did. They were halfway back to the ranch when they spotted smoke on the horizon, dark and thick, coming from the direction of the property. Ryder snapped the reins, urging the horses faster. Sylvia's heart pounded. Please not the house, please not the barn, they had worked so hard. As they crested the ridge, they could see the fire was in the southern pasture. Flames raced through the dry grass, driven by the wind toward a box canyon where they had moved 50 head of cattle just yesterday. Ryder did not hesitate. He drove the wagon as close as he dared, then jumped down. We need to move those cattle before they are trapped. They grabbed wet blankets from the wagon, soaked them in the water barrels Sylvia had insisted they bring, and ran toward the fire. The heat was intense, the smoke choking. Sylvia could hear the cattle bawling in panic, could smell their fear. Ryder plunged into the smoke, and Sylvia followed without thinking. They found the cattle milling at the back of the canyon, eyes rolling white with terror. Together, using the blankets and their voices, they drove the herd toward the opening, through the gauntlet of smoke and flame. One of the steers balked, turning back. Sylvia grabbed a stick and whacked it across the hindquarters, shouting herself hoarse. The animal finally broke and ran with the others. The last of the cattle cleared the canyon just as a burning juniper tree crashed down, blocking the entrance. Safe on the other side of the fire line, Sylvia collapsed to her knees, coughing so hard she thought she might be sick. Ryder was beside her, his face black with soot, his eyes streaming. "You all right?" he managed to ask between coughs. "Fine, you?" "Same." They sat there until they could breathe again, watching the fire burn itself out against the rocky walls of the canyon. They had lost some grazing land, but the cattle were safe. That was what mattered. It was not until later, when they were examining the burn area, that they found evidence. Footprints, boot prints too large and clear to be from earlier. The remains of a torch, carefully constructed with oil-soaked rags. "This was deliberate," Ryder said, his voice cold with fury. "Someone set this fire on purpose. Morris. Probably, but we cannot prove it. So what do we do?" Ryder looked at her, and there was something fierce in his expression. "We do not give up. We do not sell. We make this ranch so successful that he chokes on his jealousy." Sylvia felt a surge of emotion so strong it almost knocked her over. This man, this cowboy who had offered to help her on a handshake, was willing to fight for her dream as hard as she was. When had that happened? When had her dream become their dream? "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For being here. For believing in this in me." Ryder reached out and gently wiped a smudge of soot from her cheek. The gesture was tender, intimate in a way that made Sylvia's breath catch. "Believing in you is the easiest thing I have ever done." They stood there in the charred grass, the smell of smoke all around them, and Sylvia felt something shift between them. Some line they had been carefully not crossing suddenly visible and tempting. Ryder seemed to feel it too, because he stepped back, clearing his throat. "We should get back, check on the rest of the herd." That night, Sylvia lay awake in her bed, listening to the wind and thinking about the way Ryder had touched her face. She had been touched before, by men who thought they had a right to her attention, her body, her compliance. But Ryder's touch had been different. It had been a question, not a demand. It had asked permission even as it offered comfort. She thought about the way he listened when she talked, really listened, his full attention on her words. The way he explained things without condescension, respected her decisions even when he disagreed. The way he made her laugh with his dry observations about the chickens they had bought, or the stubborn calf that kept escaping its pen. Somewhere along the way, without her permission or intention, Sylvia had fallen in love with Ryder Sullivan. The realization terrified her. Love made you vulnerable. Love gave someone else power over you. Love was how her father had been destroyed when her mother died. But this felt different from the desperate, possessive love her father had shown. This felt like partnership, like two people choosing to walk the same path together, supporting each other but still standing on their own feet. The question was, did Ryder feel the same way? She got her answer 3 days later when a stranger rode up to the ranch. He was well-dressed, riding a fine horse, and he introduced himself as William Preston, a cattle buyer from San Francisco. "I have heard you have good stock," he said to Sylvia. "I am looking to purchase about 100 head for shipment back to California. I will pay top dollar." It was exactly the opportunity they had been hoping for. With the money from that sale, they could hire extra hands, buy better breeding stock, and make it through the winter with money to spare. But as Sylvia and Preston negotiated, she became aware of Ryder watching them intently. Preston was perhaps 30, handsome in a polished city way, and he was looking at Sylvia with unmistakable interest. "Perhaps we could discuss the details over dinner in town," Preston suggested. "I am staying at the hotel for a few days." "That is not necessary," Sylvia said quickly. "We can finalize everything right here," but Preston persisted. "I insist. A business dinner, nothing more. It is how I conduct all my transactions." Before Sylvia could refuse again, Ryder stepped forward. "The lady said it was not necessary. The business can be concluded here and now." Preston looked at Ryder as if seeing him for the first time. "And you are, Ryder Sullivan, Miss Adams' partner." There was weight on the word partner, a claim being staked. Preston seemed to understand because his smile cooled. "I see. Well then, let's discuss terms." They settled on a fair price for 120 head to be delivered to the rail station in Winnemucca in 2 weeks. After Preston left, Sylvia turned to Ryder. "What was that about?" "What was what about?" You practically growled at him. Ryder had the grace to look embarrassed. He was being inappropriate. He was being friendly. He was not looking at you like you were just a business associate, Sylvia, and that bothered you because... Ryder opened his mouth, closed it, then said, "Because you deserve better than some slick city buyer who probably has a wife in San Francisco. That is not your decision to make. I know." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I know it is not my business. But I am making it my business because I am tired of pretending." "Pretending what?" "That I do not care about you, that working here is just a job, that I do not think about you every minute of the day and dream about you every night." The words came out in a rush, like a dam breaking. "I love you, Sylvia. I have loved you since you told that deputy to watch where he was standing. I love your stubbornness and your courage and the way you refuse to let anyone tell you who you should be. And I know I have got no right to say any of this. I am just a cowboy with nothing but a horse and a saddle to my name, but I had to tell you because if I kept it inside any longer, I was going to explode." Sylvia stared at him, her heart hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "You love me?" "Yes. Even though I am stubborn and difficult and everyone says I am impossible, especially because of that." "Good," Sylvia said and kissed him. She had been kissed before, awkward fumbling attempts by boys who did not know what they were doing. But kissing Ryder was like coming home. His mouth was warm and sure on hers, his hands gentle as they cupped her face. She felt like she was falling and being caught at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ryder pressed his forehead to hers. "I was not expecting that." "I was not expecting any of this," Sylvia admitted. "But I love you too. I think I have for a while now. I was just too scared to admit it." "Scared of what?" "Of losing myself. Of becoming what everyone expected me to be. Of letting someone have power over me." Ryder pulled back so he could look into her eyes. "Sylvia, I do not want power over you. I want to stand beside you, not in front of you. I want to be your partner in every sense of the word. What we have built here, we built together as equals. That is how I want it to stay. Even if we get married, especially if we get married. I am not looking for a housekeeper or someone to manage my home. I am looking for a partner to build a life with." Sylvia felt tears prick her eyes. "No one has ever said anything like that to me before." "Then they were all fools who did not deserve you." They spent the rest of that day in a haze of joy and stolen kisses, working side by side but constantly finding excuses to touch, to smile at each other, to simply be near one another. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of orange and gold, Ryder asked, "So what happens now? What do you want to happen?" "I want to marry you. I want to make this official, make the partnership legal, but I will wait as long as you need." "I am not going anywhere." Sylvia thought about it. A month ago, she would have said she needed time, that she was not ready, but she had learned something important in the weeks since coming to Nevada. Life was uncertain, and the people you loved could be taken from you without warning, just as her mother and father and aunt had been taken. When you found something real, something worth fighting for, you held on with both hands. "I do not want to wait," she said. "I want to marry you as soon as possible." Ryder's face split into a grin that rivaled the sunset. "Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." They were married 2 weeks later in Winnemucca by a circuit judge, with Herbert Mills and his wife as witnesses. Sylvia wore a simple blue dress she had ordered from the general store, and Ryder wore new black pants and a white shirt that made his blue eyes even more striking. The ceremony was brief and practical, but when the judge pronounced them husband and wife and Ryder kissed her, Sylvia felt like the luckiest woman in Nevada. After the wedding, they delivered the cattle to William Preston at the rail station. The money from the sale was enough to secure the ranch's future, at least for the coming year. With the weight of financial worry lifted, Sylvia and Ryder could focus on building not just a successful ranch, but a life together. The first few months of marriage were an adjustment. They moved Ryder's things from the barn into the house, into the bedroom Sylvia had been using alone. There was a sweetness to sharing space with someone who loved her, to waking up next to Ryder every morning and falling asleep in his arms every night. But there were also challenges in learning to navigate the intimacy of marriage, the vulnerability of letting someone see you at your worst as well as your best. They had their first real fight in early December over whether to buy more breeding stock or invest in improving the barn. Sylvia wanted the stock. Ryder thought the barn improvements were more urgent. The argument escalated until they were both shouting, and Sylvia stormed out of the house. She sat in the barn for an hour, furious and hurt and wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. Maybe she was not cut out for partnership. Maybe she was too stubborn, too set in her ways. Ryder found her there as the sun was setting. He sat down beside her on a hay bale, not touching her, just being present. "I am sorry," he said finally. "I should have listened better. Your idea about the breeding stock makes sense. And you were right about the barn," Sylvia admitted reluctantly. "If the roof collapses this winter, we will lose everything anyway. So we compromise. We do the critical barn repairs now, and we buy the breeding stock in the spring when prices are better." Sylvia nodded, feeling the tension drain out of her. "I am not very good at this, am I? The whole partnership thing. You are learning. We both are. My parents fought sometimes, loud and passionate, but my mother used to say that healthy couples argue because they care enough to speak their minds. It is the couples who never disagree that you have to worry about. Did they teach you everything? Most things worth knowing?" Ryder took her hand, threading their fingers together. "Sylvia, we are going to disagree sometimes. We are both strong-willed people with our own ideas, but as long as we keep talking, keep listening, we will figure it out. I am not going anywhere, no matter how loud you yell." "I do not yell," Sylvia protested, then laughed at his expression. "All right, maybe I yell a little." They worked through the winter, making improvements and planning for spring. In January, Clayton Morris made one more attempt to buy the ranch, sending a lawyer with an offer that was insultingly low. Sylvia sent him away with a message that the property would never be for sale, and that any further trespassing or harassment would be met with legal action. They heard rumors that Morris was having financial troubles, that his own ranch was struggling. The news gave Sylvia no pleasure. She did not want Morris to fail. She simply wanted him to leave her alone. In March, they hired 2 ranch hands, brothers from Wyoming who were hardworking and honest. With the extra help, they were able to expand their operation, moving into horse breeding as well as cattle. Ryder had a gift for working with horses, and soon they had a small herd of quality animals that fetched good prices. By the time their first anniversary arrived in late summer, the ranch was thriving. They celebrated quietly, just the 2 of them, with a picnic by the spring where they had stopped on that first ride to the property. "Can you believe it has been a year?" Sylvia asked, lying back on the blanket and looking up at the endless blue sky. "Feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once," Ryder replied. He was propped up on one elbow, looking down at her with an expression that still made her heart race. "Any regrets?" "Not a single one." "You?" "Only that I did not meet you sooner." Sylvia pulled him down for a kiss, tasting sunshine and happiness and the promise of many more years to come. In October, Sylvia realized she was pregnant. The realization came gradually, a series of small symptoms that added up to an undeniable truth. When she told Ryder, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "We are going to be parents," he said wonderingly. "You are going to be a mother. And you are going to be a father. Are you ready for that, with you by my side? I am ready for anything." The pregnancy was not easy. Sylvia, who had never been sick a day in her life, found herself exhausted and nauseous for the first few months. She hated feeling weak, hated having to depend on others, but Ryder was patient and supportive, taking over the tasks she could not manage without making her feel useless. "You are growing a whole human being," he reminded her when she complained about having to rest. "That is harder work than anything either of us is doing on this ranch." As winter settled in, Sylvia's belly grew, and she found herself slowing down despite her best efforts. She directed operations from the porch, bundled in blankets, while Ryder and the ranch hands did the physical work. It chafed at her, but she knew her child's health was more important than her pride. The baby came in early May, on a morning when the desert was ablaze with wildflowers. Sylvia's labor was long and difficult. The doctor from Winnemucca had come to stay at the ranch the week before, and he proved worth every penny they paid him. Ryder stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, telling her how strong she was, how much he loved her. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and healthy, the doctor announced, "It is a boy." Sylvia, exhausted and overwhelmed, looked at the tiny red-faced creature in her arms and felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "He is perfect," Ryder said, his voice thick with emotion. "He has your nose." "Poor child," Sylvia joked weakly. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months without settling on anything. But looking at the baby, Sylvia suddenly knew. "James, after your father." Ryder's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. James Sullivan. It is a good, strong name." Little James proved to be a demanding infant, colicky and wakeful. Those first few months were a blur of sleepless nights and constant worry. Sylvia, who had run a ranch without blinking, found herself terrified by every cough, every cry. Ryder was equally anxious but better at hiding it, walking the floor with James at 3 in the morning, singing old cowboy songs in his deep, slightly off-key voice until the baby finally settled. They learned together, just as they had learned ranching together. How to soothe a fussy baby, how to balance parenthood with running a business, how to support each other when they were both exhausted beyond reason. The ranch hands took on more responsibility, and Sylvia learned, slowly and painfully, that delegating did not mean failing. By James's first birthday, things had settled into a new rhythm. The baby was walking, getting into everything, and showing signs of having inherited both his mother's stubbornness and his father's easy charm. The ranch was more successful than ever, their reputation for quality cattle and horses spreading throughout Nevada and into California. On a warm evening in June, Sylvia and Ryder sat on the porch watching James toddle around the yard, chasing chickens with shrieks of laughter. Ryder had his arm around Sylvia's shoulders, and she leaned into his warmth, content in a way she had never imagined possible. "Do you remember what Herbert said that first day?" Sylvia asked. "About me being too stubborn for any man," Ryder chuckled. "I remember. And I remember thinking he was right, you were stubborn, but that is exactly what I loved about you. They all thought I would fail. That I would sell the ranch and go back to California within a month. Shows what they know. We proved them all wrong. We did, together." Ryder pressed a kiss to her temple. "I have been thinking. The ranch is doing well, better than well. We have got good people working for us, and James is getting bigger every day. What would you think about expanding? Maybe buying some of that land to the north, the parcel that borders the federal range?" Sylvia considered it. 2 years ago, she would have leaped at the opportunity without hesitation. But she had learned that bigger was not always better, that sometimes the best life was found in appreciating what you had. "I think," she said slowly, "that we have enough. The ranch is the right size for us to manage well. We are making good money, we have a home we love, and we have each other. Why risk that for more land we do not really need?" Ryder smiled. "You have gotten wise in your old age, Mrs. Sullivan." "I am 24, ancient," he teased, and she elbowed him in the ribs. James chose that moment to trip over his own feet and land hard on his bottom. His face screwed up, ready to cry, but then he saw his parents watching. Instead of crying, he pushed himself back up and toddled on, determined. "That is our boy," Ryder said proudly, "too stubborn to stay down." "I wonder where he gets that from," Sylvia replied dryly. As the sun set over the Nevada desert, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Sylvia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had left Sacramento searching for something of her own, something that mattered. She had found it in this harsh, beautiful land. But more than that, she had found partnership, love, and family. The ranch that everyone said she could not run was thriving. The marriage that seemed unlikely had become the foundation of her happiness. The future that had seemed so uncertain was now full of promise. In the years that followed, Sylvia and Ryder added 2 more children to their family, a girl they named Margaret after Sylvia's aunt, and another boy they called Thomas. The ranch continued to prosper, becoming one of the most respected operations in northern Nevada. They hired more help as the children grew, training young cowboys and cowgirls in the same partnership model that had worked so well for them. James grew into a quiet, serious boy who loved the horses and spent hours in the barn with his father. Margaret was wild and fearless, always trying to keep up with her older brother. Thomas was the peacemaker, charming and sweet-natured. When James was 10, Clayton Morris died of a heart attack. His ranch, heavily mortgaged and mismanaged, was auctioned off to pay his debts. Ryder and Sylvia attended the auction but did not bid. They had no need for more land, and besides, seeing Morris's life's work sold off piece by piece gave Sylvia no satisfaction. She had learned that success was not about defeating your enemies, but about building something lasting. The ranch hands they employed over the years became like family. Some moved on to start their own places, and Ryder and Sylvia helped them, offering loans and advice. Others stayed for decades, growing old alongside the Sullivan family. The ranch became known not just for quality livestock, but for being a good place to work, where employees were treated fairly and with respect. On their 10th anniversary, Ryder surprised Sylvia with a photograph. He had hired a traveling photographer to capture their family in front of the ranch house. Looking at the image, Sylvia saw herself and Ryder flanked by their 3 children, all of them dressed in their Sunday best, all of them smiling. Behind them, the ranch house that had been shabby and neglected was now well maintained and welcoming. The porch no longer leaned, the shutters hung straight, and flowers bloomed in boxes beneath the windows. "I want you to have this," Ryder said, "so you never forget what we built here." "What you built, really? None of this would exist without your courage, Sylvia. You took a chance when everyone told you not to, and you made something beautiful." Sylvia studied the photograph, then looked around at the life they had created. "We made it together," she corrected. "I could not have done any of this without you." "Partners," Ryder said, as he had said 1,000 times before. "Partners," Sylvia agreed, and kissed her husband, the cowboy who had said he liked a challenge, and then spent every day since proving that love was not about changing someone, but about celebrating exactly who they were. As the children grew older, Sylvia began teaching them not just about ranching, but about the importance of standing up for what you believed in. She told them about their great-aunt Margaret, who had run the ranch alone for 15 years and never apologized for being strong. She told them about their grandfather, who had loved so deeply that he had been broken by loss, teaching them that love was both precious and powerful. Most importantly, she showed them through her own example that it was possible to be both independent and partnered, to be strong and still accept help, to be stubborn about your values while remaining flexible in your methods. James, as the eldest, was expected to take over the ranch eventually, but when he turned 18, he announced that he wanted to study veterinary medicine. Sylvia's first instinct was disappointment. She had been grooming him for years to be the next generation of Sullivan ranchers. But Ryder reminded her of their own journey, of how important it had been to choose their own path. "Let him find his way," Ryder said. "If ranching is right for him, he will come back to it, and if it is not, we will figure something else out." So James went to study in San Francisco, and to everyone's surprise, Margaret announced that she wanted to run the ranch. She was only 16, fierce and capable, and she knew the operation inside and out. "Are you sure?" Sylvia asked her daughter. "It is a hard life, especially for a woman. People will doubt you, dismiss you, try to take advantage of you." Margaret lifted her chin, looking so much like Sylvia at that age that it made Ryder smile. "Then I will prove them wrong, just like you did, Mama," and she did. By the time Margaret was 20, she was managing the day-to-day operations of the ranch with a competence that rivaled her parents. She married at 22, a young cowboy named Daniel who understood that he was marrying into the business, not taking it over. Together, they ran the ranch while Sylvia and Ryder gradually stepped back, taking on advisory roles but letting the next generation lead. Thomas, the youngest, had no interest in ranching at all. He loved books and learning and eventually became a teacher, settling in Winnemucca and starting his own family there. Sylvia worried that he felt like a disappointment, but he assured her he did not. "You taught me to follow my path, Mama," he said. "This is mine." On their 25th anniversary, Sylvia and Ryder took a trip, just the two of them, back to Sacramento, where Sylvia had started. The city had grown and changed, barely recognizable from the place she had left. She visited her father's grave, laying flowers and telling him about her life, about the ranch, about the family she had built. "I know you were worried about me," she said to the headstone, "but I found my way, and I was not too stubborn for the right man. I just had to wait for someone who appreciated my stubbornness, instead of trying to break it." That evening, She and Ryder stood on the same platform where she had boarded the train to Nevada 25 years earlier. She was 47 now, her dark hair streaked with silver, her hands work roughened and strong. Ryder was 50, his face lined with years of sun and wind, but his blue eyes were as bright as ever. "Any regrets?" he asked, echoing the question he had asked on their first anniversary. "Not a single one," Sylvia replied, just as she had then. "You? Only that we do not have another 25 years ahead of us, though I plan to make the most of however many we do have." They returned to the ranch renewed and ready for the next chapter. They watched Margaret and Daniel have children of their own, a new generation of Sullivans who would grow up learning the land and the business. James finished his veterinary training and did return to Nevada, though not to the ranch. He opened a practice in Winnemucca, specializing in large animals, and worked closely with ranchers throughout the region. Thomas's children visited the ranch every summer, city kids who delighted in riding horses and learning to rope cattle. As Sylvia approached her 60s, her health began to fail. Nothing dramatic, just the slow accumulation of hard years and harder work. Her joints ached in the morning, her energy flagged in the afternoon. She fought it at first, pushing herself to maintain the pace she had always kept. But Ryder, older and wiser, convinced her to slow down. "We have earned our rest," he told her. "Let Margaret and Daniel do the hard work. Our job now is to enjoy what we built." So they did. They spent their days on the porch, watching the desert light change, visiting with their children and grandchildren, telling stories about the old days. Ryder's health was also declining, his knees worn out from decades on horseback, his hearing going. But they faced it together, just as they had faced everything else. On a warm spring evening, very much like the one when James had been born, Sylvia sat on the porch with Ryder's hand in hers. Margaret and her family were in the house preparing dinner. The sound of children's laughter drifted through the open windows. The ranch stretched out before them, green with new grass, dotted with cattle and horses. "We did good, did not we?" Sylvia said softly. "We did better than good," Ryder replied. "We built something that will outlast us. Not just the ranch, but the family, the values. The idea that stubborn is not the same as difficult, that strength in a woman is something to celebrate, not fear. You never tried to change me. Why would I? You were perfect the way you were, stubborn, proud, fierce, and kind. I just wanted to stand beside you and see what we could build together." Sylvia squeezed his hand. "I love you, Ryder Sullivan. I have loved you from the moment you said you liked a challenge. And I love you, Sylvia Sullivan. I have loved you from the moment you told that deputy to watch where he was standing." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in familiar shades of gold and crimson. The desert evening was cool and sweet, filled with the sounds of home and family and love. In the years that remained to them, they continued to live on the ranch, watching their family grow and thrive. They saw Margaret's children grow into capable young adults who loved the land as much as their great-aunt Margaret had, as much as Sylvia and Ryder did. They attended weddings and funerals, births and celebrations, always together, always partners. Ryder died first, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78. Sylvia held his hand as he slipped away, telling him about all the things they had done, all the ways he had made her life better. She grieved him deeply, but not desperately. Their love had been so complete, so fulfilling, that she could face his loss with gratitude for what they had shared rather than bitterness for what she had lost. She lived another 5 years, spending them much as she had spent her life, surrounded by family, working when she could, resting when she must, always looking forward rather than back. She told her grandchildren and great-grandchildren about the day she had ridden into Winnemucca alone, and afraid, but determined to make a life on her own terms. She told them about the cowboy who had offered to help not because he thought she needed rescuing, but because he wanted to be part of something worth building. On a spring morning much like the one when she had first seen the ranch, Sylvia died in her sleep. She was 83 years old, and she was buried next to Ryder on a hill overlooking the property they had built together. The whole town turned out for the funeral, along with family members from 3 states and former employees who had traveled hundreds of miles to pay their respects. Margaret stood beside the grave, her own hair now threaded with silver, and spoke about her mother's legacy. "My mother taught me that being stubborn is not a flaw when you are fighting for something that matters," she said. "She taught me that partnership is not about one person leading and one following, but about 2 people walking side by side. She taught me that love is not about changing who you are, but about finding someone who celebrates who you are and who you want to become." She was told she was too stubborn for any man, and maybe that was true for most men. But my father saw her stubbornness as strength, her determination as courage, her independence as something to admire rather than fear. Together, they built something that will endure long after we are all gone. This ranch, this family, this legacy of strong women and strong partnerships, that is what she leaves behind. As the family gathered after the funeral, sharing memories and stories, the youngest great-grandchild, a girl of 5 named Sylvia after her great-grandmother, asked her mother a question. "Was Grandma Sylvia really stubborn?" Her mother smiled. "Yes, sweetheart, she was. Very stubborn." "Is that bad?" "Not when you are being stubborn about the right things. Grandma Sylvia was stubborn about following her dreams, about not letting anyone tell her what she could not do. That kind of stubborn is very good." The little girl thought about this, then nodded solemnly. "I want to be stubborn like Grandma Sylvia." And in that moment, looking out at the ranch that had started with one woman's determination and one man's faith in her, the family knew that the legacy would continue. The story of Sylvia and Ryder, of the woman who was too stubborn for any man and the cowboy who said he liked a challenge, would be told for generations. A reminder that the best love stories are not about one person saving another, but about 2 people choosing to build something beautiful together. The ranch continued to thrive under Margaret's guidance and eventually passed to her children and grandchildren. The Sullivan family became a fixture in Nevada ranching, known for their quality stock, their fair dealings, and their commitment to partnership over hierarchy. And while the world changed around them, growing more modern and complicated, the values that Sylvia and Ryder had established remained constant. Every spring, on the anniversary of Sylvia's death, the family gathered at the graves on the hill. They brought flowers and stories, laughter and tears, ensuring that the memory of that first stubborn woman and the cowboy who loved her would never fade. They told new generations about the day Sylvia rode into Winnemucca, about the challenges she faced, about the partnership she built with Ryder, about the family and legacy that grew from their love. And on quiet evenings, when the desert wind whispered through the sage and the stars filled the vast Nevada sky, it was easy to imagine 2 figures on the old porch, sitting close together, watching the sunset, still partners in whatever came next, still in love after all these years, still proving that the right kind of stubborn, matched with the right kind of challenge, could build something that would last forever.